Tricia, you'll prompt me when it's ready to go.
Yep. Do you see it on the screen?
Yep.
Yep.
All righty. We're ready.
You hit a button and then.
Go ahead, Mark.
Hello, everybody out there. I'm Mark Gebhardt from El Paso County Planning Department. I want to thank you for being here tonight for our discussion of the El Paso County Master Plan. With us tonight are the consultants, Housel Levine, John Housel, and Tricia Parks. Several county staff members are present. Craig Dossie had to step away. Nina Ruiz, our planning manager, is present, and Lauren is our PIO office, who's handled all our advertisements going forward. With us are also the advisory committee. The Board of County Commissioners created an advisory committee or a standing committee for review of the master plan. Andrea Barlow's the chairman. Additionally, there's planning commission representatives on this body, and Tom Bailey's present to speak on the second slide on a couple topics. Next slide. First, you need to know what the El Paso County Master Plan is present. The current master plan is the policy plan from 1998, which included growth projections through 2020. Well, we're past 2020 now, and certainly a time to update those plans. It includes small area plans, 10 of them, from 1977 to 2008. That's the most recent plan. There are topical elements. This includes water, which is our most recent master plan topical element, transportation, parks, mineral resources, wildlife. Drainage basin plans are required for our master plan because we actually utilize that and the state statute requires us to use that if we're using a drainage basin planning fee. Interestingly, our master plan also includes a number of older sketch plans from 1982 to 1986. Those will ultimately be eliminated as a part of this. The effort that we're doing now will replace the policy plan, the small area plans, and the sketch plans, while this document that we're bringing forward today is the main document with supporting topical elements and drainage basin plans. Tom, would you give a little introduction about how the Planning Commission looks at the master plan?
Yes, thanks a lot, Mark. Great introduction. And I've been on the Planning Commission for a couple of years now, and one of the biggest frustrations that we as a commission have, and I think the Board of County Commissioners shares, is the outdated guidance that we have to follow. A lot of those plans, as you can see here, have been around for a long, long time. When I first came to the county in 1982, anybody that's been here since then knows just how different this place is from how it was back then. And having some updated guidance is essential for us. So as a planning commission, so instead of trying to guess what the intent of the community is, we will actually by going through this process, we've been able to collect data and get inputs from large swaths of the community that will help us to better reflect where the community sees us going and not try to guess that. And I've been very pleased with the way this process has worked and the engagement of the county commissioners as well as the entire planning commission to make sure that this product is something that we can take going forward to help us to, as it says here, share the vision that we as a county have come up with as we develop or evaluate development proposals. And this will also help us to establish some new regulations and update the regulations that we have as a planning commission to follow and that developers in the county will have to follow, so that we have a truly modern process to take us through the next 20 years. And I think, John, it's over to you.
Next slide.
All right, Tricia, go ahead and go to the next slide. I'm going to run through the presentation here. We've got a lot of material to cover, so I'll try to be as succinct as I can. We can come back in Q&A to answer anything that we need to ask. Mark, did you want to go over the taking public comments through what date and this stuff?
Yes. We've requested, and you'll see a lot of advertisement on the next slides, et cetera. We've requested public and review agency comments through April 9th. We've utilized our review agency, our standard review agency called EDARP, and so we've asked for over 260 people to refer this plan. We've had comments from those entities. We've had comments from the public that are generated through the website. And those end on April 9th. However, we will accept comments in theory through the Planning Commission hearing process. As we noted, the Planning Commission is the entity that has to adopt a master plan. That's different in Colorado, maybe from other locations, and it's different from the municipalities where the city council may adopt the master plan. These are the dates we've established now for the Planning Commission: May 5th at 9 a.m. and May 26th at 9 a.m. Those were advertised, and those have been in all the announcements that we've put out. Next slide. Here's some of the advertisements and some of the ways to get to that. If you're already in this meeting, you must have found a way to get into it and register for the meeting. On the main county web page on the left, there's a place to click here and to open up the master plan. Our PIO has developed these newspaper advertisements. We've utilized the weekly newspapers and the monthly newspapers. Next slide. And these are two locations where you can actually review the master plan. On our planning department webpage, if you click your El Paso master plan there, it'll take you to this next slide or the next page, and that you can see the under the engagement section there, you can open up the master plan. There's a place to look at the story maps and also a place to offer comments back to us. Next slide, which is John.
All right, Tricia, I'm going to try to request control. Let's see if this works, if you get a request or not. You're muted, Tricia.
I'm giving you control.
All right. So I'm going to go through a presentation here. We've got a lot to cover. It's a pretty extensive document. So I'm going to be moving through this pretty concisely. We can circle back during Q&A to try to answer as many questions as possible. Again, it's available on the county's website. Key components of this have been up for months. As an entire document, it's been up for a while now. So we're going to start moving through this. I'm going to provide an overview of the draft master plan, and then we'll go over sort of the timeline and next steps going forward. All right, Tricia, is that you moving it or is it me? Okay, so where we are in the planning process so far, it's a 14-chapter document, the master plan is. We've completed all 14 chapters. All 14 chapters have been reviewed extensively by county planning staff, by the Master Plan Advisory Committee, and the other county departments that have relevant review over key components of the document. So all 14 chapters of the entire document have been drafted, including all text, all graphics, and all maps. The key plan components for this document, as I indicated, there are 14 chapters: introduction, community vision, land use, housing and communities, economic development, transportation and mobility, community facilities, infrastructure, military, recreation and tourism, community health, environment, resiliency and hazard mitigation, and then lastly, implementation. Again, this truly is a comprehensive document. It covers a very wide range of important topics facing the county now and for the next 20 years. And what I'm going to be presenting this evening is a quick overview of these 14 chapters. I will spend more time and more detail on some of the key chapters like land use, housing, and economics, and maybe move more quickly through some of the other chapters that are really contingent upon other planning initiatives in the county, or things that are more secondary or supportive to the primary master plan components. So first off, chapter 1 explains the purpose of a master plan. Think of it as a policy guide or a foundation for future decision making to assist the Board of County Commissioners, the County Plan Commission, county staff, developers, residents, not-for-profits, but everybody to serve as a way to help assist and aid in decision making with a unified vision over the next couple of decades. It's a more comprehensive and coordinated approach to planning, as opposed to having a myriad of different plans in a myriad of different jurisdictions that might not be very well coordinated. This is a very comprehensive and a very coordinated approach to planning for the entire county. And it really takes into consideration several key planning considerations. These key planning considerations were really where the extensive community feedback that we got, the regional context, where El Paso County is located in Colorado, in the Front Range, and in the country. The notion of this multi-jurisdictional context. The county doesn't exist in a vacuum, and it doesn't have the authority to make a lot of decisions on its own. It has to work with the Colorado Department of Transportation, several military bases, several municipalities, water districts, fire protection districts. There are a lot of different jurisdictions that the county has to coordinate with in the delivery of the plan. Your existing land use, we're not planning in a vacuum. We have to plan in the context of how the county currently exists today. We have to take into consideration the very many environmental and ecological and conservation considerations. This is first and foremost to residents. It was made very clear through outreach. And then ultimately, by taking a look at demographic and market projections and conditions, recommendations have to be predicated on an understanding of the way things are now and the way things are projected to be in terms of growth, market going forward. The planning process was a 9-step process that engaged the community extensively. So far to date in this process, we have engaged just under 4,000 people, both in interviews, small group, large group, and online. The county is a 2,100 square mile area with several 100,000 residents all told living in El Paso County. So both face-to-face and online engagement was a crucial way to engage people. And through that, we were able to ascertain what was most important, what were the priorities based on the feedback from these 3,800 people throughout the beginning of the project. Regional context is very important. Again, it's a very, very large area. You have several municipalities that exist within the county and are big influencing factors in the county's planning going forward. Colorado Springs, Fountain, Monument, Manitou Springs, Palmer Lake, Calhoun, Green Mountain Falls, and Rama are all entities we have to deal with that exist within the regional context of your location on the Front Range. What's really remarkable about this as a study area is you go from mountainous regions on the west to plains on the far east. You have heavily wooded and forested areas like Black Forest on the north, and then you have almost desert-like sand conditions in the far south. So in your one county, in this one study area, you have one of the most remarkable ranges of environmental and ecological conditions of any county in the United States. So it's pretty remarkable to understand that context. Chapter 2 was community vision. This was developed over the course of several months and has actually been crafted and drafted going back probably 8+ months ago. It is a vision and the core principles. The vision statement talks about what is important and a vision for El Paso County over the next 10 to 20 years as the county grows, accommodates new appropriate and desirable development, while prioritizing the conservation and protection of key environmental features and ecological systems and natural resources. Detailed goals and objectives were then developed and principles for each one of the areas developed for each one of the different chapters. So land use and development, housing and communities, economic development, transportation, community facilities, the military, transportation, all these different things have detailed core principles, and underneath each core principle, detailed goals ranging anywhere from 4 goals to up to 7 or 8 goals per these different categories. And again, there's a category and it's structured under each one of the 13 elements of the master plan. The next thing I want to go over, and I'll spend a little bit more time on this because this is the heart of the plan, and this is the land use chapter. At the core of any master plan or the core of any comprehensive plan is the notion of land use. What is the expected land use throughout the entire county, the character of development, and how will this unfold over time? So we broke this down into 3 main components, where we're defining as the key areas of the county from a land use perspective, the areas of change, and this notion of place types or land use. And I will go through these 3 right now to explain this. This has been out there for public consumption now for probably 6 or 8 months or more. We did a video series, rolled out 1 every 2 weeks or 1 every month with a video, a presentation, a questionnaire survey response, and a ability to map your comments in the map, in an actual map for these areas to get feedback as these were developed. And based on feedback that we got from residents across the county, these were developed and revised, again, probably 6-8 months ago. And they've been available on the website since. So the first is the notion of key areas. And there are 10 key areas in the county that we've identified. Military installations in the 2-mile notification area, potential areas for annexation because of municipal growth, enclaves or near enclaves, small towns and rural communities, the Fountain Creek Watershed Flood Control and Greenway District, the forested areas largely up north and on the western area, Pikes Peak Influence Area, the Tri-Lakes area, Colorado Springs Airport and Peterson Field, and then the natural resources, the uncommon natural resource areas. Each one of these are key areas when we're looking forward to planning in the county. They're not bound by arbitrary boundaries or jurisdictions or arbitrary planning areas. These are features or areas in the county that are geographically specific, that no matter what happens in or adjacent to these areas, these key areas will have an influence on what growth looks like going forward. So if the key area is environmental, those environmental features and steep slopes and wooded areas will be a key determinant in how land use and development unfolds going forward. If it's a military base or within a close proximity to a military base, that will be an influencing consideration as development is considered in the decades to come. Likewise for existing communities, airports, wooded areas, small enclaves, areas that will likely be annexed. These are all things that will influence planning and development for the county as we move forward. The next is areas of change, and this is really important for us to cover. If the county sees the growth it is anticipated to see, which is a couple 100,000 people, 200 to 250,000 people over the next 20 to 25 years in the county, some of this is going to happen, a lot of it's going to happen in incorporated areas. Some of it will happen in unincorporated areas. A lot of this change will happen in areas that are currently unincorporated, but likely to be annexed over time. So this is a lot of change, and change can be a little bit unnerving. And this change is coming. We know population is coming. We know development will be following. Where is this change likely to take place? We think it's a very important component of this plan. So we've identified several different things in the county. We've identified those areas in the county that are protected or conservation areas where we expect to see little to no change at all. And those are the areas that you see here in green. We then talk about undeveloped areas that are areas of minimal change. These are areas that are currently not developed and will likely remain undeveloped for the next 20 to 30 years. That's the light yellow. Primarily the areas on the eastern portion of the map. Next is developed areas that will see minimal change. So these are areas that currently exist, rural residential, suburban residential, maybe a commercial area. They are what they are now. They will likely see little change in the decades to come. Areas around them might change, but these are areas that are currently developed, have an established character, and will likely see very minimal change. These are the areas in sort of the golden color, yellow color, like you see up here near Black Forest, that darker yellow. The dark orange color is areas where we expect the majority of new development to take place. These are areas that are largely currently undeveloped that will see new development. So they will become something other than what they are right now. This is where areas of major change will take place. That's the dark orange. You see this largely on the eastern edge of Colorado Springs. And then areas in blue are areas in transition. These are areas that currently exist and are currently developed, but will likely change over time into different types of developed areas. So these are the 5 different areas of change. Areas that are conserved or to see no change because they're protected. Areas that are undeveloped now that will likely remain undeveloped. Areas that are developed that will likely remain basically the way they are, like Black Forest. Areas where we expect new development to likely be located, and it's no surprise it is adjacent to the areas with infrastructure, and it is primarily adjacent to areas that are currently incorporated to municipalities. And then the blue areas that will likely transition and change over time. Another key graphic that we think is important is to put this into context. The previous map showed where these areas are. This graphic simply shows by land area how much of the county will be changing. So about 90% of the county will see no change or very little change. About 90%. 14% is that protected or conservation area. 71% of the county is areas that are undeveloped that will likely remain undeveloped and will see almost no change. 6% are areas that are currently developed like Black Forest and will see very little change. And then 10% are these areas of new development or transition, the dark orange or the blue. So about 90% of the county, we expect to see no to very little change. About 10% of the county by area is where we expect to see the majority of the development take place. Apologize for the transitions taking a while, it's a big file. The next notion is that of place-based approach. A lot of you, when you think of land use, think just of that. Single family detached large lot, single family detached small lot, agricultural, townhomes, condominiums, apartments, duplexes. These are all land uses. And in an area of 2,100 square miles, it's too big of an area to get to parcel specific land use designation. Can't do it. A smaller city can, a county of this size cannot. And when you ask people to think about their communities, they don't think about a land use. They think about my neighborhood. I want my neighborhood to be like this. I want my downtown to be like that. I want our open spaces to be accessible and to be like this. But what they describe are these places, neighborhoods, shopping areas, employment areas, open spaces. This is how they describe where they live. It's place, not land use. And the notion is called place-based approach or place types. So the El Paso County Master Plan is predicated on the notion of place types. And we've identified the following place types: rural, large lot residential, suburban residential, urban residential, rural centers, regional centers, employment centers, regional open space, mountain interface, military, utility, and then incorporated areas. All of these place types are mapped on the map that you see here. I apologize if it seems a little washed out. But all of these place types are mapped in the county. They reflect the current land use and character of development that exists right now, and it designates a land use or a place type for the areas we anticipate develop to go forward. For each one of these place types, what we did is, here's a place type, suburban residential. We described the character of what a suburban residential area is. We identified the primary and supporting land uses we expect to see in those areas. We provide photographs to show you examples of the types of use we expect to see in those areas. We have a map on the page that shows the only thing in color being that place type and where this type of land use and place type exists that goes with the character and the photos. So you can see exactly the area in the county we're talking about it. And then on the following page of the place type, to identify the character in the map, we describe the place type characteristics. What are the design considerations? How should this place function? What are the supporting uses? And what are the overall characteristics of this place? We then generated a procedural 3D model to give you a sense of the types of uses and development patterns that could exist in this place type. So we did this for all of the 12 place types. So for each one of the 12 place types, again, we identify the character, the primary and supporting land uses, the photographs typifying what is there or what should be there, and a map identifying exactly where this area is in the county. We provide then a 3D model to just sort of visually give you a sense of what could go in these areas. And we describe the characteristics, functionality, and design considerations of that place type. We do this in detail for all 12 place types mapped to every area of the county. So it's a very easy sense to get a sense of how the county will develop over time. It's very guiding. It establishes the character. It does a very clear job of saying, these are the areas that are most important that will influence growth going forward. These are the areas of the county where we anticipate change to take place, areas of the county where we do not expect change to take place, and in areas where development is going to happen, in areas that are going to be preserved. This is the character of those places in terms of land use, image, functionality, and design considerations. So it's a very methodical approach. It's very thorough. It safeguards the character and the integrity of the county in a master planned approach. It's not this little area planning independently of another area of the county. It all works with the county together, and that's the purpose of the master plan. The next chapter, chapter number 4, is housing. This is a continuation of the notion of place types and land use. We look at priority redevelopment areas, the mix of housing, the issue of affordability, and environmental compatibility. There's no question that the majority of the land use to be developed over time in terms of area will be residential. We map out what we consider to be the priority development areas. That's those hatched areas you see right now on this map, those black hatch marks. This is overlaid on top of the different residential place types I just mentioned. Rural residential, large lot residential, suburban residential, and urban residential. Those are the different colored yellows that you see. These black hatch marks are where we prioritize that type of development taking place. This is consistent with the areas of change and where we think the majority of development will likely take place. This doesn't mean development's going to take place and change the character of the area. It may be just simply a continuation of a rural residential area, not change a rural residential area. So just because there is a black stripe there doesn't mean we're looking to intensify it or to change it. It may be a continuation of what's on the ground now. It may be intensification if it's an area that's currently vacant. We identify the areas of priority annexation. You can see here the yellow areas are the cities: Colorado Springs, Monument, Palmer Lake. You'll see here the different Fountain. You'll see the different cities here in yellow. The areas in orange are currently unincorporated county areas that we would anticipate over the next couple of decades to be incorporated into the adjacent cities. So they will become city territory, not unincorporated. This is consistent with the expectation of utility expansion and the more intense development that we likely will see in these areas. This has been developed in close coordination with the cities and the municipalities in the county as they have begun to drill down on their annexation plans and priorities. The county has worked with them cooperatively to coordinate where these annexation areas will likely be. So this is a very important map as well. The next thing talks about sort of those urban residential priority areas, those black hatch marks on the previous map. On this map, we identify in much more detail. This is the areas near Colorado Springs Airport. These are some of the larger enclaves. These are some of the smaller enclaves. We bullet exactly where these areas are in the county, these residential growth areas. And then we talk about the character of how these individual smaller areas ought to be developed as they change over time. So this is a more granular look of those priority redevelopment areas for residential. We then take a look at housing mix, tenure type, and the need for variety as the population changes. You're still going to need, and there's going to be a high demand for rural residential, that really large lot, very sparsely populated residential areas. There's also going to be a growing need for suburban residential, and there's going to be a growing need for different types of residential product mix as the population ages, as the population grows, and as a more diverse population moves in terms of age and the number of people. So the housing chapter goes into more detail as to the different types of housing for seniors, for young professionals, the importance of maintaining that rural county character, different approaches to handling accessory dwelling units and attached residential units. So this really pulls together the approach for housing and residential development for the entire county. We talk in detail about affordability. I won't get into it here, but it's a very, very important component of the county, and we address it in detail in this chapter, identifying different ways of addressing affordability. We map owner disparity across the county by zip code and different areas. And we do the same thing not only for owner disparity, but for renter disparity. And that's what these maps highlight here, where some of that disparity exists within the county right now. Another thing we talk about in housing is environmental compatibility. Your residential developments are going to be your biggest consumption of land area for new development. Your commercial areas sort of tends to be in like a node or a key intersection or a key corridor, but going out for acres and acres and acres and acres or miles will be residential development. So that's going to have a big impact on the landscape and on the natural environment. So we really take a close look at how we can do this with greater compatibility with the natural environment and ecological systems. So we map the conservation easements in the county. We identify those areas of prime rural character that have to be protected. We identified the Central Colorado Conservation District, the Conservation District for Double L, the El Paso County Conservation District, and the Kiowa Conservation District. And we map these out to make sure we're paying attention to these as the county develops. We then also identify the principle of conservation design. And this is the idea that rather than coming in and just wiping everything out and putting in a residential subdivision, we take a look at steep slopes, riparian corridors, mature trends of trees, other wildlife habitat areas that are of high value. And these things get taken into consideration when residential development is proposed. And this plan puts forth the fact that when development is proposed, especially residential because of the area consumption, that conservation design principles have to be incorporated appropriately into new residential development of all types going forward in the county. So environment is a big, heavy play for residential development. Next, we look at economic development. We look at priority redevelopment areas, business development, commercial development, and workforce development. And we broke it out into several different areas. Here you can see the 4 different categories. Rural centers, regional centers are the dark red, rural centers are the pink, and then employment centers, industrial, warehouse, distribution type things are in the blue. And then in the hatched areas that you see over some of these are the priority development areas. So in the preceding pages or in the following pages, we break each one of these out. This shows all 3. The first is commercial development areas, and we talk about regional centers, mixed use, and the residential populations these commercial development areas have to serve. And the 2 we zero in on here are Falcon and Glen Eagle. We talk about the character of these areas, how they should develop and intensify over time, and the areas of service they provide to county residents as the county grows in population. The next thing we take a look at is the next phase of commercial development or priority place type. Let's see if it generates. Is the business development areas. And here you can see the employment areas. So these are Meadow Lake Airport, Colorado Springs Airport, Security Widefield along 25. So some of these are around industrial corridors. Some of them are near airports. But again, the map shows where these employment areas are. We then number them in this map and on the following pages. And we describe the character of development and the anticipated intensity of development and uses anticipated for each one of these areas. And again, I'm just showing you examples of what's in the plan. We do this for all the different areas. Next is workforce development. And we talk about priority areas, small businesses, large industry, and leveraging county resources for economic development. This is chapter 5. So we really zero in on the different enterprise zones, the opportunity zones, the county resources that the county has to leverage for economic development, to spur the attraction and support of industry, employment, and business and quality economic development in the county. And this lays out where those areas are in the county, given the county's resources and ability to leverage. Next is the transportation plan, and I'll go through this pretty quickly. The county has detailed transportation plan. It has a major transportation corridors plan, roadways, public transportation, multimodal, airports, and railroads. But again, the county has a detailed transportation plan. So the objective in the master plan is not to replicate everything in the transportation master plan, but to make sure that growth and development and the master plan dovetail with the transportation corridors master plan, so that as transportation infrastructure is planned, as the county grows and develops, those two things work in harmony to one another. So areas of fastest development and expansion have the infrastructure needed to provide the quality of life and emergency services and access needed to maintain those. So we take a look at roadway functional classifications, road system performance, jurisdiction. Again, all the roads in the county are not the jurisdiction of the county. Municipalities have jurisdiction over their roadways. The state of Colorado has jurisdiction over some of the major roadways, and the county has jurisdiction over some roadways. It's the county's job, to the extent possible, to coordinate all of these in terms of access, management, maintenance, and performance as a network of transportation. So we take a look at the Colorado Statewide Transit Plan 2045. We take a look at the El Paso County 2016 Major Transportation Corridor Master Plan. So we looked at these agency plans in detail to make sure the master plan is dovetailing with these transportation realities by the county and other jurisdictions to provide a functional network in the decades to come. So this chapter of the master plan was really developed in coordination and conjunction with several other plans focused on transportation and several other agencies whose priority is to develop and to provide a transportation system that works. So the county is just one cog in that wheel. Public transportation was another key consideration that a lot of people mentioned, more prevalent in some of the developed areas of the county, but also important in the undeveloped areas or the rural areas of the county. And we looked at park and rides and the state transit plan, and we mapped some of the public transportation components that exist in the county. And you can see that on this map here. And then multimodal transportation, and this is multimodal in this sense because we've covered transit already, and vehicular. This is really walking and biking. There is a rich component in the county of biking, hiking, trails for biking, trails for hiking, both for leisure as well as biking for functionality in the county. So a big part of this, both for engagement of the environment, connecting where people live and where they work, and for recreation and tourism purposes, clearly hiking trails and biking trails are crucial, and we put all these transportation improvement recommendations in here. The other transportation component that is also an economic development component are your airports. A lot of counties and a lot of cities don't have airports. You have several. And while there are challenges to having airports, they are far outweighed by the benefits and the opportunities generated by having airports. The county, again, has several. So we've mapped where all these are. You can see here, military airports are in blue, public and private airports are in red. And we discuss each one in detail, the surrounding areas, and how to leverage these as transportation hubs and later as economic development engines for different areas of the county. And then rail, we talk about both passenger and freight, and I'll just go through these pretty quickly. Next is community facilities. Community facilities are those things that really contribute to quality of life, county government, public safety, fire, police, emergency response, and then your schools and education systems. These are things that contribute to the high quality of life and people expect them. So for the county government, we look at multi-jurisdictional coordination and the different departments and agencies within the county, the need to participate in these public things, and the taxes. There's a lot of text about this. Public safety, we talked about the jurisdictional issues in the county and the need to cooperate with a lot of these. The county isn't the sole provider of public safety in the county as an entity. So if we take a look at some of these things, you can see here, there we go. There are several different 21 different fire districts in the county, for those of you counting. That's a bunch, 21. That level of coordination required to coordinate 21 different providers is a big deal. So what you see mapped here are all of the fire and emergency service facilities existing physically throughout the county. So you can see how extensive that is. And this network with different roles and responsibilities has to provide that response time and public safety expected whether you live in Colorado Springs, in the unincorporated areas just outside of Colorado Springs, or whether you live in the unincorporated rural areas where there just isn't a lot of density or development around you. Public safety is crucial no matter where you live, and providing that is complicated. This chapter begins to get into that network that exists and what the county can do to better coordinate and leverage resources to provide a high level of public safety, no matter where you are in the county. There we go. Next up is education. And there's some pretty interesting facts here in terms of education facilities that currently exist. And again, I talked earlier, and I think most of you participating this evening know of the projections of 250,000 more people moving into El Paso County. Now, granted, a lot of that will be in the cities and not in unincorporated El Paso County. But when you think of that number of people coming in or by population, how many of those are going to be school-aged children? And if those are indeed school-aged children, how many more schools will need to be built to accommodate the educational needs of that growing population? So right now you have 17 school districts in the county, nearly 300 facilities, 288, 219 public schools, 69 private schools. And you can see on this map here where the public schools, private schools, colleges, and universities are. And again, it's an incredible network, an important resource. This is not the direct responsibility, obviously, as El Paso County as a government. They're not responsible for education, but as the jurisdiction in which all these facilities exist, there's a need to make sure that they run well and are coordinated, and the county is cooperative as can be. When a school gets located, a new school, as a land use, it has a huge impact. High school or middle school campuses can take up huge number of acres, bigger than most commercial or private uses, have a huge impact on traffic patterns, water consumption, land use of adjacent compatibility. So schools have a big impact, and there's going to be some new schools needing to be built. I think this map here is pretty telling. It's quite the patchwork or the mosaic. These are all the different school districts that exist in El Paso County right now. And you can see, based on the color, the extent of how many there are. And overlaid on top of this, again, are the priority development areas, those black hatch marks, those diagonal hatch marks. So wherever you see those diagonal hatch marks, these are the areas that we consider to be priority development areas, where we think the majority of development will take place. And if this is the majority of the development to take place, this is where the majority of residential development will take place as well. And with those rooftops and with those units will come the need for schools to service students as these areas develop and grow. So we've superimposed and overlaid the priority development areas on top of the school districts map. Here we go. The next one is infrastructure. And again, the comprehensive plan has to coordinate this. But again, the county has detailed infrastructure planning, and we're not going to get into that level of hyper specificity and detail. But that said, if you're looking at water consumption or water or utility services, gas, electric, water, sewer, roads, land use and development drives the need for these things. In areas of intense development with a lot of residential and new commercial, your infrastructure demands are going to be much higher. In areas of intense residential development, your water consumption will be higher. We have to make sure that utilities and infrastructure keep pace with the demand for development. And because the county is not the entity delivering all of these things, but it's often delivered by municipalities within the county or service districts, water districts, or gas or electric utilities. Again, not the county, but these are all service and facility and utility providers in the county that have to coordinate with development approved by the county. So this is very, very crucial that this level of coordination and planning take place. So I'm going to go through a couple of things real quickly. Not a surprise, water is one of the most important things. We did the master plan for Aurora, Colorado a few years ago. And at the beginning of the process, I interviewed the mayor and I sat down in the mayor's office and I said, Mayor, what are the 3 most important issues facing Aurora? And he said, that's easy. Number 1 is water. Number 2 is water. Number 3 is water. Water in Colorado is important. Aquifer recharge, supply, development on top of these areas, water consumption for potable water, for drinking, for fire suppression, you name it, for industry. We had to work with the 2018 County Water Master Plan. Again, this is one of those things where the county has a detailed water master plan, just like they have a detailed county transportation plan. We're not looking to reinvent or replace those plans where all that hard work has been done and the level of detail has been created, but to dovetail those planning efforts into the master plan so they coordinate with one another. So the quality of water, the water quality management plan, and management of water systems overall is something that the master plan begins to coordinate. You can see here the 2018 water study planning regions. There are 8 different regions in the county. You can see them there. It looks like more than 8 colors because region 4 is divided into 4 subregions. So, but we really had to coordinate with the supply demand gap and areas that we know are going to be an issue going forward. And closing that gap of water supply and water demand. We don't want to be in a deficit of water demand far exceeding water capacity to deliver. And this has to be done again in the 2018 County Water Master Plan. Some of you are probably very familiar with that planning process. So we had designate here the designated water basins in the county, and we map those areas, the Denver Basin and the 3 other basins, and we show where those are in the county. And we talk about storage and conservation of water in El Paso County and what that looks like, with a surprising amount of detail about the aquifers and the condition of those aquifers. We've had some comments when this has been reviewed by the advisory committee and others to put in here some implementation requirements to better monitor aquifer levels and the health of the aquifers going forward as development takes place. And those changes have already been put into the implementation chapter based on feedback already we've received. But you can see here projected growth area and water demand. So you see this map with the blue circles over here on the right. The circle size is relative to the gap in current demand and projected 2060 water demand, so 40 years out. The bigger the circle, the bigger the gap in terms of demand and supply. So we can see here by looking at this map and anticipating where development is going to go, where we will likely see the biggest gaps in water supply and demand. And this is the importance of this, the importance of the aquifers, and the importance of these systems going forward cannot be underestimated in terms of a priority for the county. Gas, we talk about the different gas providers that exist, and we map the different areas here where that service providers are taking place. Atmos Energy, Black Hills Energy, Colorado Natural Gas, Source Gas, and Xcel Energy. And we map those here and we talk about the different providers of gas. We do the same thing for electric. This is a little bit more complicated, a mosaic of districts, but we identify on here, in case you were wondering, most people only know what affects them. But again, the county has to be aware of all of this because it falls within the county's jurisdiction, all the different providers of electricity as a utility to the different areas of the county, and we map all this here as well. We also talk about wind energy and solar energy, the ongoing projects, and where these projects and wind farms currently exist and are appropriate in the county. And we talk about the importance of this alternative and renewable energy sources right now that will be needing to and currently rely on these alternative energy sources. The other important infrastructure is telecommunications. Telecommunications are as important as roads, sewer, and water. In the digital age we live in now for commerce, personal communication, business communication, and economic tourism, everything else, that telecommunications infrastructure has to be in place. And in areas where telecommunication infrastructure is lacking, it can cause some real problems, both for individuals as well as business and different enterprises. So we really talk about the need to prioritize and formalize this infrastructure of telecommunications throughout the county. I won't go into it in big detail, but it is a priority of the county as these areas develop. Chapter 9 talks about military. This may be one of the most robust chapters on military I've seen in any comprehensive plan across the United States. The military is a crucial steward, if you will, of areas of the county. They are an important partner in the county in terms of the overall character, employment, and makeup of the county. They take up a considerable land area, and these areas have influence as dictated by law, an influence area, not just on the military base, but extending out 2 miles away from the military base. And again, you have several of them, and we've identified them here. Regional coordination of these facilities is crucial on several different fronts. We talk about coordination regionally and state law. We identify the different facilities here, how big they are, and that 2-mile notification barrier or zone that exists around each one of these military bases. And if for no other reason, if you don't have a good handle on the impact of the military in El Paso County, when you go through this document, read this section. It's really enlightening as to the footprint and significance and importance and value of the military to El Paso County. So it's a section that we really had a lot of help with in terms of creating this chapter, and I think it came together really well. We talk about installation recommendations for military bases in the areas around them, utility, land use compatibility, transportation and access, stormwater management, air and ground operations. And if you take a look at some of these things, it's an important and a huge land use and planning consideration. Next is recreation and tourism. Most comprehensive plans in the United States do not address tourism. Every state has different enabling legislation that authorizes municipalities and counties to prepare master plans or comprehensive plans. This comes from the authority of the state. Every state gives this authority to counties and municipalities, requiring them to have a comprehensive plan or a master plan. Every state is a little bit different. One of the differentiating things in Colorado as a state is the enabling legislation in the state of Colorado requires that counties and municipalities in their master plans address tourism. It is a very important component to the state of Colorado, and therefore by sort of the waterfall effect, it is made important to counties and to municipalities. If every level of government is addressing tourism, that's the best chance collectively to have robust tourism as a state. So we have to address tourism, and we also address parks and recreation in chapter 10 of this document. So we do a service area analysis looking at your current facilities, the need for additional land, regional trails, and then state and federal lands. And in El Paso County, those state and federal lands are extensive. So we map here the county parks and the service area around those parks. So you can see the parks in green. These are the county parks. Again, cities will have their own parks. A lot of developments will have their homeowners association park for their residents. These are the county facilities. And around them is a 5-minute drive time, 10-minute drive time, and 15-minute drive time. So you can see in the blue areas, the darker blue is within 5 minutes of a county park facility. The medium blue is 10 minutes away. The light blue, you're 10 to 15 minutes away. So the coverage of park facilities, county-owned park facilities, is pretty good. And a lot of the areas that are not county-owned facilities are still outdoor environmental recreation areas. They're just not the jurisdiction of the county. So pretty good coverage. We thought that was important to show where these facilities were and who has access to them conveniently throughout the county. We then take another look at tourism, and we look at the Regional Tourism Act, the Colorado Springs and Pikes Peak Regional Destination Master Plan, environmental tourism, and the economic impact of tourism. It goes without saying that tourism is such a big component of El Paso County. It drives a lot of the economy, from restaurants to recreation to retail to hotel to lodging to camping to equipment. Tourism drives a lot of industry and commerce. It also has a lot to do with the sense of place and the character of El Paso County. Like the transportation chapter, like the water chapter, a lot of detailed planning has gone into and consistently goes into tourism. We're not trying to replicate these other county and regional tourism plans, but rather to dovetail the master plan of the county with these other regional, county, and local tourism initiatives. And that's the importance of this, to make sure the county is a good partner in tourism. We identify environmental tourism. You can see here some of the trails that I talked about earlier. Pikes Peak area has approximately 450 miles of trails. Colorado Springs approximately 290. El Paso County, outside of those two areas, about 130 miles of trails. Trails here are crucial. It is a big part of the economy, sense of place, tourism, and recreation. So we thought it was important to map where they were and the significance of them in the county and stitching these networks together. Community health is obviously a big deal, both in terms of community health and the built environment. The county has very robust initiatives on county health, working with those professionals and those programs, including the 2018 Community Health Improvement Plan. Again, another detailed plan that was done outside of the master plan that we are incorporating and dovetailing with in our effort. We take a look at equality versus equity. We take a look at the impact of the built environment for walkability and having healthy neighborhoods and healthy places to live. We take a look at access to food and access to healthy food. Here you can see a map of access to healthy food by area and percent in terms of how close they are in proximity to where they can get food throughout the county. We thought it was an important component of the built environment. It was a big part of the county's health initiative. Environment is next. Clearly, when we did outreach and we talked to 3,800 people so far, overwhelmingly, the number one thing people said was the natural environment, the ecosystems, the wildlife habitat, the natural beauty. This is what helps define El Paso County. It's one of the reasons we moved here. It's one of the reasons we love to live here. It's one of the things we have to diligently safeguard as the county grows. So with that in mind, we took a hard look at Chapter 12, the environment, water features, water quality, natural resources and land conservation, wildlife protection areas, and wastewater management. So again, the notion of conservation design, protecting key areas, ecosystems, and wildlife protection is throughout several chapters of the plan. This is not the only place it exists. It exists, and that terminology is used in several other areas of the document. But here we talk about surface water, groundwater, riparian areas. Riparian areas are creeks and rivers. It's a fancy word for sort of flowing water. So that's called a riparian area or a riparian corridor. It's not just the open water that's moving in a creek or a river, but it's that unique wildlife and ecosystem and species habitat that exists along the banks that forms what we call a riparian corridor. We took at natural resources and land conservation. State and federal land plays a big part. There's just a ton of percentage of land in El Paso County for state and federal protection, which is a big help. You've got a lot of wildlife species that exist in wildlife protection, and the protection of habitat and biodiversity is a key thing. Some areas of the county are sort of like some open plains. Some areas are highly valuable in terms of wildlife protection and habitat. Other areas, there's not as much to offer. You've got some wooded areas, some riparian areas, some mountain areas, really rich in wildlife habitat that we need to protect. So we talk about species management, researching and monitoring these areas, education and awareness to residents, builders, business owners of the county as to the importance of these areas. And again, these notions are carried over into the place types and the notion of conservation design, which is a concept that is going to be used to evaluate all development going forward. And I'll get into that in a little bit more. So we're truly trying to make this meaningful. Resiliency is a big deal, needless to say, and I'm going to cover this quickly, but Superstorm Sandy, when it slammed into the East Coast, Hurricane Katrina, New Orleans, Hurricane Ike, the wildfires in California, fires that you've seen in El Paso. Resiliency and hazard mitigation is a real thing. And over the last 10 to 15 years, it has become increasingly important as a thing to vigilantly plan for. The notion of, hazards and emergencies happen, and then we just have to recover from them, that notion is gone. And the notion now is how can we be better prepared for these things so that we experience them with less detriment and we can recover more quickly. The notion of being resilient. It's not just about recovery, it's about front-end resiliency. It's a game changer. It's really changed the last 15 years or so in the industry. And those major natural disasters have been a driving force. So resiliency planning, hazards, disaster response and recovery is what this chapter 13 covers. It's a very important, very nuanced aspect of master planning. And there are people that focus on nothing but resiliency and hazard mitigation. They're professionals that devote themselves solely to this endeavor. And our job is to make sure we plan for that and dovetail with that. So the ones we look at for hazards are blizzards and winter storms, wildfires, drought, and flash floods are the ones that most prolifically plague or the potential to plague, not the county as a whole, but specific or key areas of the county differently. Take a look here. You see sort of the burn perimeter. You can see here, and I know you've experienced them not that far long ago, some pretty devastating fires in El Paso County and in some of the most pristine and beautiful parts of the county. But what you can see here is the burn perimeter for Black Forest, Waldo Canyon, Carson Midway, the 117 burn perimeter, and the sort of the county fire districts are those areas in yellow that are governed by one of the, what did I say, 21 different fire districts that exist. It's a lot of coordination. But we take a look at things like fuel, what's fueling the fires, slope, it can spread faster on steeper slopes. There's a lot of trees or brush, how dense that brush is. And then access, how do we get access to fight these fires if the infrastructure isn't there to provide access to these areas? So wildfires is just one of the hazards that we talk about in the master plan. And we also talk about flooding impacts, the dams that exist in the flood zones. Again, you can see here in yet another map of the county as the flood zones map throughout the county and the, sort of the 1% annual chance of flood event. And we map where those areas are in the county. Pretty easy to track where the low-lying areas or the riparian corridors are by looking at that map. And we put in here strategies to work with these agencies to reduce the impact. We look at that disaster recovery and response, resiliency, mitigating these things and being prepared. And a lot of this is done through coordination of the Pikes Peak Regional Office of Emergency Management and the steps, mitigation, being prepared, responding, recovering, and making a plan. And this is consistent, again, with those regional efforts at resiliency and hazard mitigation and recovery. This is not a county standalone effort, but we need to make sure we're planning with them. And lastly is implementation. Implementation is the last chapter. This is how the county can implement this over time. This is not going to happen overnight. The county is expected to grow considerably. The planned time frame for this is 20 years. Comprehensive plans, master plans are typically written on a 20-year horizon. They can plan further out than that. They are often needing to be updated prior to that, maybe 10 years, but they are written with sort of a 20-year horizon in mind. So we take a look at the introduction, land use regulations, administration, funding, and action. And I'll go through this pretty quickly. A couple of key things. The introduction in this chapter talks about the importance of implementation and how the county and partners can successfully work to incrementally implement the plan and its recommendations over the lifetime of this document. Some things can be done right away. Some things will have to unfold as development occurs over the next 20 years. It's not all do this tomorrow. You need to regularly use the plan on a regular basis to inform decision-making. We want to develop and maintain partnerships. I went through several different agencies and organizations that exist within the county. County has to work with them to deliver this and to make this happen. This is not all on the county. Some things are, but many things are responsibility of others. The county just needs to make sure that those other agencies are as effective and appropriately actionable as they possibly can. Maintain public communication is crucial, and to update the plan regularly when needed, because change will likely occur. The land development regulations, this is a big deal. Once the master plan is adopted, the county should be going back and looking at its zoning and subdivision. And if there are aspects of the zoning and the subdivision regulations that do not dovetail with the plan's recommendations, the zoning and subdivision regulations should be changed to allow the plan to take place over time. This is important. So the land use plan, this master plan, is a guide for evaluating land use applications. So as a developer comes forward with a 300-acre development or a new commercial regional center, this document should be used by staff, by the developer, by the Plan Commission, and by the Board of County Commissioners to evaluate the development proposal against the recommendations of this document. It should help inform that decision-making. This is not regulatory like zoning, but it should help guide the discussion and the decision and the evaluation of these different uses. And I'm going to talk about this in a little bit more specific detail. There are going to be a lot of uses that come down in the future that we didn't anticipate, that no one could anticipate. They may be highly desirable. They may in fact be necessary, but nobody anticipated them, let's say 8 years from now. How do we handle that application if it's not consistent with the plan? Or how do we handle an application for development that is consistent with the plan? Well, this plan has to be used to evaluate those proposals. And we've prepared a checklist, a master plan consistency evaluation checklist that we believe should be given to any developer proposing something. It should be used by staff, it should be used by the Plan Commission, and it should be used by the Board of County Commissioners every time a developer or somebody proposes a land use related application in the county. Everything from a planned unit development to a rezoning, to a special use, to a final plan of consolidation or subdivision. When these things are put forth, there are certain questions that should be asked to ensure the master plan is serving to guide those recommendations. And here's what some of those are. So let me go through these. Hopefully you can see these. The first questions are baseline considerations. Is there a market? Is there a viable market for what is being proposed? Does it have a chance of succeeding or not? Or is it something that's going to sit vacant once it's built? Is there a need or a desire for the use in the county? Is this something the county wants? Is this something the county needs? But these are questions developers should be prepared to ask or answer. And these are questions the county should be prepared to ask. Is there a market for it? Do we need it? Do we want it? That's number one. These could be measured against the master plan. 2, geographic considerations. Are the uses proposed consistent with the place type they're proposing it? This is a rural residential place type according to the master plan. Mr. Developer, is what you're proposing consistent with the rural residential place type? If it's not, strike 1. But can we use this to evaluate a proposal? Is it consistent with the areas of change? Are you proposing a development in an area we said we don't want to change? Well, that's not good. Or are you proposing development in an area we expect and in fact want to change? Well, that's good. So geographic considerations, and these are things based on the specific location these things are proposed. Is it the right use? Is it the right location? Is it the right intensity? Is it the right character of development? Is it consistent with the master plan? Next are county system considerations, transportation, infrastructure, telecommunications, utilities. Is your proposal consistent with what we're trying to do in terms of these county systems? Is it going to support these county systems? Is it going to put a drain on these county systems? Are you proposing a way to mitigate any impact of these county systems? Or is it something we shouldn't have here just because of the burden on the county systems, we can't accommodate or support it? So the impact of the development on the county systems. And the last category is best practices. And this goes back to the priority I've placed, or we've placed, on the environment and conservation design and habitat and ecosystems. And these questions are, does the proposed development include conservation design? Is this designed appropriately for where it is located? Are there natural features, natural and environmental elements, ecosystems, or valuable habitat that you should be incorporating into your design that you are not? And if so, you need to incorporate these design considerations. So this is a checklist that we've developed. It can be finalized after the plan is adopted, but it gives the recommendation of this is a checklist developers, staff, Plan Commission, and County Board of Commissioners can use to ensure development incrementally is moving in the right direction collectively for the county. We think this is a very, very useful tool for elected appointed officials, staff in the private sector. And then lastly, real quick, we talk about funding. We identify probably 100 different funding sources that the county can begin to pursue to help pay for this. County can't pay for everything on its own, but what are the programs that exist for housing, transportation, parks, the environment? We identify all the different funding sources that they should pursue. That's several pages in the plan. The last thing is an action matrix. We've gone through and we've mined all the recommendations in the plan. So we've mined all the recommendations from 140 pages. We identify the chapter of the recommendation, the core principle the recommendation supports, the goal the recommendation supports, the objective, the strategies, the priorities, the time frame, and the page number the recommendation is located on. We've put this into a very extensive matrix at the end of the plan. It looks something like this as an example. So this shows the objective land use 1. Some areas of the county should be planned for new development, while others should be preserved and protected. We identify the objective, the goal. We identify the priority specific strategy. That's that black bulleted text. Next to that, we talk about the time frame. Is it, short term, long term, right now? We identify the page number in the document. We talk about that strategy. So if you want to go back and say, I want to learn a little bit more about these areas of change, page 40, I can go right back to there to read more about it, to read more about this priority strategy. But this one place in the document has all the recommendations arranged by goal, principle, objective, strategy, time frame, and it references back to the page number in the document where you can read more about it. It's really a great catch-all at the end, and a really useful tool to monitor success over time. So with that, happy to all of you. That's probably the last slide I had to go through. I know this is a ton of material, but the next steps, and I guess, Mark, you can jump here if you want to talk about the next step will be the adoption and the public hearings that we have scheduled for May. We did public engagement in April. I think this slide actually might be out of date, so let me get off of this slide. And I think the next two engagement opportunities besides the online engagement will be a public hearing and the Board of County Commissioners meeting in May. Mark, if you want to go to that. So Tricia, you can probably get rid of the slide at this point and turn it back over to Mark to facilitate Q&A.
Actually, John, the hearings in May are with the Planning Commission.
Right.
It doesn't go to the Board of County Commissioners.
Right.
You had a very extensive presentation for the public. I hope we've kept a number of them on board. And I think Tricia will forward any of the questions going forward.
Well, we started with 38 attendees. We now have 39. So it looks like we actually picked one person up. So.
The process has been a bit of a challenge because the world keeps changing on us. Yesterday or recently, the county did a new master plan for Santa Fe for the Parks Department. We've had this recent purchase of Corral Bluffs information, Corral Bluffs properties. The world keeps changing on us. And what Tricia will ultimately go into is we need to have people fill out the comment form, the same place where you got registered. You can fill out that comment form and provide those comments back to us. If you're not able to do that, I think at the very first slide, it actually had my email address. I hate to give that out because I can get a whole lot of emails. But
Mark, I'm going to put your cell number in the chat for everybody to see real quick.
Yeah. As you read through the plan, if you're from Black Forest and you saw the area that says minimal change undeveloped, that doesn't mean there's nobody there. That doesn't mean there aren't houses there. Look at the details in the chapter of what minimal change undeveloped means, because that says additional development can occur there on isolated parcels and intends to or needs to meet those place type examples that currently exist from what's there. So don't presume that minimal change undeveloped means nothing's going to be there.
And I guess the main thing before we field questions, Tricia, is change is tough. I don't care if it's a little bitty farming community of 400 people or a major metropolitan area of 1 million. Change is difficult. And we don't have the ability to just say we're not going to change. That's not an option. The burden placed on the county by the state enabling legislation for master plans is to put a plan in place to plan for the next 20 years responsibly. And we have to put a plan in place to responsibly accommodate and plan for anticipated and projected growth the best we possibly can. But a plan of no growth is not an option because that's not realistic. So the key was to accommodate anticipated growth while protecting maintaining, and enhancing those attributes of El Paso County that are most important to people and most defining of El Paso County. That was the challenge, and that's what we strive to do.
All right, so for questions, a couple of people have submitted questions. Most of them, or there's a couple about the next steps. John, I believe that was the last thing you went through. So I believe we answered that question.
But Mark, you just
The
want to
other
go,
question.
hold on, Tricia. Mark, do you want to go over those dates one more time? I might have muddled that a little bit. So the dates of the Plan Commission meetings that are coming up next month.
Yeah, the first date is April 9th that we anticipate people to provide comments back to us, both review agencies and public comments. We intend to take those public comments and address those to a master plan advisory committee meeting on the 14th of April. Presumably they would say, go forth and make these changes that the public has said or disagree with the changes, and take this forward then to the Planning Commission. So a new document will come out after that 14th of April advisory committee. The Planning Commission dates are May 5th and May 26th. So there's 3 weeks between those dates. Those are special dates, not the normal Planning Commission date on a Thursday. Those are a Wednesday. At present, we anticipate them to be virtual. We have not seen whether the county will open up and have a full meeting availability at Centennial Hall. So we don't know that answer quite yet. Those would start at 9 o'clock. We've booked the whole day if possible. Those are our public information office and our IT folks will work with how to respond or how to have call in comments going into that meeting. That's not been fully set up quite yet because we haven't even advertised these dates yet. We'll be doing advertisement coming up this month.
Thanks, Mark.
Another comment, the water needs disparity slide seems to indicate an extreme level of water need going forward. Where is that water going to come from?
Well, I guess that's one I get to answer here. As John presented, we had coordination with the municipalities. The municipalities, especially the city of Colorado Springs, have developed and are modifying their annexation plans or 3-mile boundary plans. It would be presumed that a fair amount of the growth that would be coming forward would occur within those municipalities or have service by those municipalities. There are continued development of Black Forest, presumably, or the northern part of the county that's in the Denver Basin aquifers, would presumably continue to utilize wells for their water supply. Continued development within the districts in the Falcon area and others, those are primarily served by metropolitan districts that then provide the water to those entities. Again, the water master plan indicated that in the future, unless something changes, there could be shortages of water or need to acquire additional waters to provide for those growth projections that we've seen.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Next question. Do you anticipate major changes to the zoning code based on this plan?
I think you said major changes to the zoning plan.
The
Zoning.
zoning code based on this plan.
Well, as John indicated, and the experience has also been with Colorado Springs recently, they adopted a new plan COS. Now they're doing retool COS to redo their entire zoning code. Our zoning code may not be as old as the city, and so ours is done more recently, but yes, there likely will be changes to the zoning code to accommodate this. especially the idea of conservation design, which you could only presently do under PUD zoning. And maybe there needs to be modification there under regular zoning, so that you don't have to always go to PUD zoning.
I think another example is sometimes zoning can be done wholesale or comprehensively, the whole ordinance, or what they call a UDO, a Unified Development Ordinance, or UDC, Unified Development Code, where zoning, subdivision, land development regulations, signage is all done as part of one package. But more often than not, sections of the zoning code will be updated independently. And right now, for those of you listening, El Paso County has an RFP out to redo their landscaping requirements in their zoning ordinance. So sometimes key changes can be made incrementally to a zoning ordinance, even if not wholesale changes. But without having a crystal ball or committing to the county to anything, is our experience working across the country. We do a ton of zoning. That one of the most common action to be taken after a comprehensive plan is adopted is to then go back and revisit the zoning. Sometimes zoning changes aren't needed. Sometimes they are incrementally. Sometimes they are dramatically. But zoning is typically the first thing re-examined after a plan is adopted. Because if you have a plan that says A and a zoning that says B, you're never going to get A. And so you got to fix that. And so my guess is over time, the county will be updating its code, whether incrementally or more comprehensively, don't know what the need is. But updates to the zoning ordinance are likely.
Okay. Next question. As a guide for development, what level of application of this plan do you anticipate being implemented?
You say that first part again, Tricia?
Sure. As a guide for development, what level of application of this plan do you anticipate being implemented?
Well, let me answer that first, Mark. The document as a whole, when you say talk about would be implemented, when the master plan gets adopted, it is the guide for the county. And when development applications are made, it is one of the tools used to evaluate and guide the decision on developments. So as soon as it gets adopted, it should be used by staff, plan commission, and others to guide decision-making. Again, it doesn't dictate the outcome. It doesn't mandate regulations, that's zoning, but it guides decision-making. So the second the plan is adopted, it should be used to help inform and guide development, decision-making, and evaluation. To further the effectiveness of that end, we have developed, first time we've done this, and I'll say that I think it's such a good idea, I'm going to be using this now on every comprehensive plan we do going forward, is that checklist, that land use checklist that we have developed that talks about general considerations, geographically specific considerations, systems considerations, and best practice considerations. So is there a need or a desire for the use? Is it in the right place? Is it the right type of use? Is it the right character and intensity? Is it where growth should take place? Is it consistent with the systems, transportation, water, energy, utility? And is it best practice? Does it incorporate conservation design, protect the environment? So we've developed the checklist as part of this plan. And the recommendation of this plan is that that be further developed. They can take exactly what we've done, or they can take the idea and refine it, but actually develop a sheet of paper, a piece of paper that they would hand to an applicant, that they would hand to the plan commission member, that they would hand to a developer, say, hey, when you go to public hearing, this is what they will be used to evaluate your proposal. Partly, there are other things too. And so if this plan gets adopted, that recommendation is in there. And if they develop that one sheet and use it as part of the application process, then by default, the default will be to use the master plan to evaluate development. And so it should be incredibly effective from day one. That's how we've designed it.
And I would note in addition to that, generally in Colorado and certainly in El Paso County, the master plan is an advisory document. However, there's language right in our approval documents for rezoning and other plans that it has to be in general conformance with the master plan. I can tell you that my boss, Mr. Dossie, is not one to have something sit on the shelf. He's not doing this plan to have it sit on the shelf and wait for some other time to happen. There'll be ways to try to implement this plan or portions of this plan, generally through the zoning. It'll be almost immediately used to review projects going forward. Those projects that come after this plan is approved would be judged based upon this plan.
So I guess to cut to the quick, we expect this to be immediately effective at guiding and improving development going forward and used on a regular basis.
All right, thank you. Regarding Black Forest, will the master plan reaffirm the density guidance as currently in place with the Black Forest plan?
That's kind of a setup question here. For the Black Forest area, this plan essentially says continue what's already there with a minimum density of 2.5 acres, utilizing a conservation design for other projects going forward, which essentially says do what is already there.
Right. So yeah, there's a couple of things that govern this. And again, it's not specific just to Black Forest because this plan looks at a comprehensive county-wide plan. It doesn't break it out into individual areas for planning purposes. However, that said, the place types, which I talked about earlier, designates, the appropriate type of character and development for different areas of the county. And there are 12 different place types. And just to answer this question, I'm going to pull it up here on another screen for me to look at. So a couple of things. One is the influencing key area. The majority of Black Forest is hatched as a forested area, which has specific consideration for anything in that area going forward as a key area of the county. These forested areas, Black Forest specifically identified in that. Areas of change, majority of Black Forest is considered to be an area of minimal change. You're going to get some infill or a new development or something like that here or there, but pretty minimal change. It's going to be consistent with the character of what is there right now. And lastly, the place types. So the place type for Black Forest is primarily large lot residential. So this is a third place this area is specifically referenced. And large lot residential talks about the primary use being single family detached residence, typically on 2 acres or larger pieces of property. It talks about it being low density, a lot of open space. It talks about the wooded areas. It talks about the need in another chapter about the importance of conservation design, wildlife protection, forested area protection, habitat protection. So there are several different areas of the plan that collectively provide a level of protection and guidance for Black Forest and other areas of the county beyond what even current planning does. So it's not carved out as a geographic boundary and say Black Forest shall be this, this, and this. But it does say the key area is wooded areas, and that includes Black Forest with a lot of delineation as to what that means. Black Forest is part of that discussion. So are other areas of the county. We talk about rural residential, this large lot, this wooded area, this natural environment, that's in the place types. Covers Black Forest, also covers other areas. We talk about this area of minimal change, areas that largely are going to reflect what's on the ground now. You're going to get some change, but you're not going to see dramatic change. It's an area of minimal change that's identified in this for Black Forest as well as other areas of the county. We talk about the importance of conservation design. Doesn't matter where, wooded areas, riparian areas, habitat, wildlife, water, these areas that have to be protected and considered of any new development going forward. Black Forest is part of that as well. So there isn't a delineated, boom, this is Black Forest and what will regulate it. Instead, there are 5 or 6 or 7 other areas of the plan that talk about those defining characteristics of Black Forest and safeguard it from several different directions in the document. So Black Forest, as well as other areas, and the unique character and defining attributes of those areas, including Black Forest, are very well protected and enshrined in several different ways in this document, more so than are in existing countywide. I would say Black Forest is in good shape.
John, in addition to that, that's just the topic of lot size. Then
Yeah.
you have the topic of compatibility of land uses, such as one-off land uses and others, and how they conform or associate with adjacent land uses. We're much stronger in this planning process for those.
Well, again, I think the approach was to look at what was important to different unique areas of the county, rather than calling one out for a jurisdiction that historically has been in place, and approach it from an area that transcended those jurisdictional boundaries. This is important to the county. If it happens to be in this area, it's important to this area. If it happens in multiple areas, it's important to multiple areas. But what makes Black Forest special, unique, and cherished is addressed in several different ways in this document.
All right, thank you, John. Where's the chapter on preserving property owners' quality of life, approving high-density residential adjacent to RR-5 residential degrades the quality of life?
Again, there is no one chapter on quality of life. You would have to look at the entirety of the document and the cumulative impact of the document and what it protects. We talk about adjacency and compatibility of adjacent place types. We talk about compatibility of adjacent uses. We talk about those features and attributes that need to be protected as part of conservation design. We talk about development not outpacing the need for infrastructure. We talk about certain areas of the county that the rural, low density, no incompatible uses nearby as a characteristic. All these things are addressed again in several phases or places in that document. So instead of just looking at one place and say, aha, this one area talks about quality of life, there is no one defining characteristic of quality of life. There are probably, depending on what literature you read, 11 to 21 different quality of life indicators. Collectively, this document addresses all of those and probably then some. So as a collective document, there are several things in here that can be pointed to in multiple chapters that are geared towards safeguarding quality of life and safeguarding the character of unique areas of El Paso.
Right. What is the website for viewing the master plan? I posted the link in the answer section of the chat, but you can also go to the county's planning and community development website page and view it there as well.
Good job, Tricia. Look at that. You asked the question and answered it at the same time.
Yep, one breath. All right, next question. It sounds like Black Forest served by an aquifer has insufficient water to handle the growth you propose in this plan. Is that correct?
Is that what?
Is that correct?
I don't think there's anything that I don't think that the plan shows that what we have proposed, meaning we, the county, for Black Forest, would demonstrate an insufficient level of water supply going forward. I would have to go back to dig to see exactly how you're wording that or if that's an accurate statement. I think we've mapped from other sources areas where supply and demand gap exists, projected out to 2060. That's 40 years from now. Those blue circles reflect a 40-year change. Don't know what's going to happen during that 40-year period. And again, Black Forest is indicated as an area of minimal change. So we're not showing extensive development in Black Forest. So I don't think we're showing anything or planning for anything in this plan that is pushing for an increased chasm between water supply and demand because of what we are proposing in this document.
Okay. Another question on water is, what is the plan when the Denver aquifer runs short / when wells run dry?
Let's say that that's a slightly leading question, and there's too many variables at play to answer that at this point in time. Developers have to prove water ability to deliver those water. Again, the county doesn't deliver water to these folks, or a lot of different water districts. And you're talking about a hypothetical question that cannot be answered at this point. I can't speak to an aquifer drying up.
John, through this discussion, I would remind the audience that the county has the most stringent water supply requirements for well drilling in the state of Colorado. We utilize a 300-year water supply. Other other entities and the state utilizes a 100-year water supply.
Right.
All right. It seems to be very little time for public review and comments, only 10 days. It would seem more reasonable, this was not a question, sorry, to have a 3-week public review. I think this is a good opportunity to remind the audience that the plan has been on the project website for several weeks prior to this presentation.
Well,
And available for public.
I think the other thing to note, Tricia, is key components of the plan, like the core of the plan, land use, place types, key areas of change, key areas. Those have been on the website for months and months and months with virtually no change. So while the preceding months building off of those that haven't changed much, we've looked at infrastructure and transportation and conservation design and other pieces. Those key core elements have largely been unchanged, available online for months. And at the time they were developed, had extensive outreach rolled out over several weeks, including videos, surveys, mapping, specific to each one of those before they were finalized and put online after feedback. So while the whole document's been online for weeks and will continue to be online for another month plus for comment, key pieces of this have been available for months. So we've gotten a lot of feedback from a lot of people based on what we've put online. So even though the whole package is available for now for a few weeks and for another month plus, as this has been developed, everything's been put online as it's been developed, and we've gotten feedback all along the way. So.
Okay, and then will this presentation be available online for those who didn't view it? John, I believe we were just speaking to that. Yes.
Yeah,
This will be posted.
This is this PowerPoint has been prepared and saved as a PDF. The PDF will be made available on the project website.
It is currently.
Yeah, and the majority of the slides in here are direct pages from the plan itself. So if you view the plan, you'll see what's in the presentation. Although some of the slides have like a tee up outlining what's in the chapter. But yeah, it's like the plan, the presentation will also be available. Is the video presentation, Mark, that you and Craig and others did still on the website?
There's a whole series of video presentations on the website, but the community exchange, or the one that Lauren did, our PIO office, is available and will continue to be available.
So I just want to make sure people know that. So we used videos and presentations, surveys, and mapping feedback platforms as this plan's been developed over the months or years. And currently there are videos that walk people through, and you get to see Mark and Craig and others, their smiling faces as they explain what was done, why it was done, what's in it, what's not in it, the purpose, et cetera, et cetera. So in addition to the document itself or the presentation that we've gone through tonight or with the advisory committee, there are also videos of people walking you through what we've done. So several different ways to sort of take it. And we know it's a lot to take in. All right, so it looks like that's about it. I know we've been running, it's about a 7:45, so we've been hanging in there for a while. So I guess I want to thank everybody for their comments, their questions. I know not everybody agrees on everything, but the one thing that's reassuring is that everybody seems to really love El Paso County. It's your home, it's a place you love. We want to make sure we get this right. There's a lot of change coming that we need to accommodate or manage and guide as best, as responsibly as we can, while being true to the character of El Paso County and all of its unique areas. And that's, again, like I said, that is what we have had endeavored to do. So look forward to getting your comments, your comment cards and your feedback online. And for those of you who are eager to get out and see people in person, for anybody who may be coming to the Plan Commission public meetings in May, you'll see my smiling face.
Well, thanks everybody for participating. Thanks to the consultant for putting this on. And the panelists who have been a part of this, including other staff members and planning commissioners and PIO office and everyone going forward.
Mark, can you run through real quick, and maybe you did, if you did, I apologize, the makeup, not necessarily the individuals' names, but the representation we have on the advisory committee. The Master Plan Advisory Committee has been just remarkable. They have diligently gone through page by page, paragraph by paragraph, sentence by sentence, map line by map line, and reviewed and tweaked and discussed everything. And they've really done such a diligent job over the last couple of years. But to let people know, this was not developed in a vacuum. And in addition to 3,800 people or so we've heard back from the county, the representation of the advisory committee has been fantastic. So can you just run through, like, I know we've had developers, military representation, business representation. What are some of the other folks we've had on the advisory committee?
Well, we do have small business representation that actually lives in the forested area of actually has a business in the forested area of Black Forest. We have a strong overlap with planning commissioners. Interestingly, several planning commissioners were on this committee first and then ultimately got appointed to the planning commission as well. We have a land use planner. We have military expertise for people that were in the military previously. Who's on the Airport Advisory Commission that's a part of it. So it's a wide range of business interest in finance. And the advisory committee was appointed by the Board of County Commissioners. It's not something that planning department or staff said, here, we want these people on the advisory committee. The
Right.
board viewed that and appointed those people for their special expertise in certain areas.
Right, and in addition to our firm, House Levine, as the lead agency, we had as team members Tetra Tech. Tetra Tech is an environmental consulting firm. They work all over the country. We work with them in states all over. But in terms of resiliency, sustainability, the environment, water, Tetra Tech led that charge. And HB&A, which did the military base alignment plan a couple of years ago, served as our lead for liaison to and coordination with the military components of this document. So I just want to mention that those two firms were crucial team members to pulling this together.
And as a part of the advisory committee, we also had liaison members that we recommended, which included the groundwater studies, which included the Parks Department, the PPACG, and other entities. Through this process, the broadband plan was developed, and the broadband was a part of the committee. So we've tried to bring all those people together as a part of this effort going forward.
All right, thanks everybody. We appreciate your time. Look forward to your continued involvement. We're getting close, but we still want to hear back from you. We still, nothing's finalized, and we will do everything we can to make this as good a plan as we possibly can before it gets adopted. So thanks for your time this evening. I know we compete against a lot of other things you need and want to be doing in your lives, and we look forward to your continued participation in the process. So thanks so much for your time this evening.
Yes, thank you, everyone.